Well, hello and welcome back to Watches Live on Watchbox Reviews. Well, the last week has been a little bit rushed. Between Basel and a blizzard, the killer bees descended on our studio, so we missed last week's Watches Live. Now, we are going to make up for lost time tonight with a selection of what I consider the best watches this evening. Literally the best watches that I was able to pick out of our collection and inventory this evening. I've got everything from a grand complication that's a really nice piece of real estate in Hong Kong in value terms, to sub $3,000 for not one but two outstanding watches that have tons of street cred, style, and staying power. So we're going to run the gamut from Audemars Piguet to Laurent, Ferrier, and everything in between. I want to acknowledge Matt Foster. Matt, you are the first knight. Adam J. Odell, welcome. You are second. Let's jump right in. This is an interactive show, and I'm giving away free stuff. So I'm going to be drawing names out of my tim@thewatchbox.com email because we still haven't set up a purpose email for this. All the same, I'm glad to get acquainted with every one of you. You're going to be winning cool free stuff like grand Seiko hats and an Omega pen. So send me to tim@thewatchbox.com your actual name, your physical mailing address, because I can't email you the gift, and a phone number to reach you, and I will draw you from our pool, whether international or domestic, previous winner or first-time contestant. If you've already entered, you're already in. No need to enter twice. All right, first things first, let's pick a winner just to show that I mean business. Our first winner of the night is Mitchell Morgan. Mitchell, you are winning a very slick Omega pen. Let me see if I can grab this right here. Okay. I admit this one's a bit more dress watch than sports watch. All the same, there's no doubting the quality of the hardware. From me to you, Omega branded, from Basel World to your doorstep. Thanks for joining us, Mitchell. You are our first winner of the night. All right. Now, we have some hardware on the table, the likes of which, frankly, even I am shocked to encounter. Let me start with something that's shocking because it's simply uncommon and different in its execution. Now, Giuliano Mazzulli is new to the watch world. The first manometro, effectively a pressure gauge, transliterated into horological form, came out in 2005. Now in 2013 we saw the watch you see here, which is the Trasmissione Meccanica Chronograph, effectively an homage to automotive imagery, but taken to a level that frankly, you probably need an Italian sensibility to attempt. The Swiss never went this far with auto-themed watches, principally because they were involved in co-branding, not literally turning the watch into a transmission. But that's what you have here. Now, those of you who follow racing know that there are two types of transmission gears. Straight cut for strength, but they're very noisy, and tapered or spline style, like you see here, which are more common on road cars and road cars adapted for the track. They're smoother, they're quieter. Well, you have the imagery of the slash cut gears here, plus a transmission plate. Not only that, but you'll note, if we can, that all of the individual stations of the hours, the bolts of the outer facing of the clutch, are actually black polished. So this is a remarkable watch featuring an engine-turned fashion underneath the clutch portion, the black polished indices, and a gorgeous satin finished anthracite on the hour track as well as the inner dial with shocks of red. Now, I'll also mention that it is a reverse chronograph, so you actuate this one with your thumb. Ergonomically correct. It's also inverted, so you actually start and stop this one using the lower pusher on the 9 o'clock side of the case. Automatic winding. The watch is also lugless. As you can see, it effectively has no lug. It's like my JLC Snowdrop from the 70s. What it does have are these two extensions that provide a little bit of bolstering so that the watch sits more squarely on your wrist. Now, though 48.6 millimeters across the round, it is 48.6 millimeters without any lugs, so it actually wears easily. And as you can see, features butch bolts on the top that actually serve a purpose retaining the bolsters. It's also a Tuscan-made Italian strap for Italian style. What do you pay for this watch? Well, about $4,950. The retail is $7,500. Dollar for dollar, I don't think you can find a watch with more character. It may be too Italian for some, which is to say a bit too exuberant. That said, A for effort and originality. This is as cool as it gets within the realm of real Italian watch design. Panerai, I love you, but you're Swiss these days. All right. So let me show you this watch on my wrist because it's a bit of an ergonomic miracle. For a watch 18 millimeters thick and 48 millimeters across the case, you wouldn't expect it would wear this well on a 16 centimeter wrist. But again, 48 is the diameter. It's also the lug-to-lug dimension. So though the watch is thick and it is a huge horological hamburger of a thing on the wrist, but it is very comfortable. And I guarantee you, not only will you have the only one in the room, but you will have the only one that even looks remotely like this. Giuliano Mazzulli, previously a typesetter, decided that in a paperless world, watches were the way to go, and I can't disagree. And again, for under $5,000, that's a hell of a lot of style and flair. Swiss watches and Italian design, the match made in horological heaven. Okay, so now BS is asking in the chat box, will that fit underneath a dress cuff? Yes, if you're Godzilla and you're dressed to kill. That said, I can see that we've got Simon Holt joining in, saying he got his Hulk 3 days ago, and he's now broke. I know that feeling. I'm like wringing my hands over this JLC minute repeater that I'm looking at right now. On the one hand, it's all the money. On the other hand, it's all the watch. I know that feeling. He says the Batman is next, Simon. I understand. You say need to go JLC or Zenith next. You know where I stand, but if you want to get the full collection, you say you've got the Batman, you've got the Hulk, I think you got to get some sort of Daytona next. That's just me. I like themed collections. All right, Val Blitz just logging in. Welcome to the party. Of course, enter your name, email, and physical mailing address. Send it to tim@thewatchbox.com to be entered in our live drawing for cool stuff. Now, I showed you a watch that's accessible. Let me show you a watch that's not terribly accessible, but exquisite all the same. Now, for $30,500, you do get what you pay for from Laurent Ferrier, the polar opposite of Giuliano Mazzulli's design ethic. Nevertheless, Laurent Ferrier himself, a longtime master watchmaker and complication specialist for Patek Philippe, actually raced cars at Le Mans in the 70s, so he probably understands where Mazzulli's coming from, but his watch design is classical in the extreme. Now, this is the stainless steel, do I have your attention? Galet micro rotor, 40 millimeters. What you're looking at is the in-house FBN 22901 3-day power reserve micro rotor double direct impulse caliber. Now, what you're seeing here was a collaboration between Fabrique du Temps, which was founded by Michel Nivas and Enrico Barbassini, the two-thirds of B&B Concept that decided not to join the Hublot MP department when B&B Concept went bankrupt in 2010. They founded Fabrique du Temps, which was bought by Louis Vuitton in 2012, and they were good friends of Laurent Ferrier and his son Christian, so they helped with the computer modeling of this movement and the engineering. Laurent Ferrier's workshop performs the fabrication, the finishing, and the adjustment. Now, if we can get super close, and I'm willing to go out on a limb and stretch to bring you guys closer to this movement, you can see what is correctly described as the finest standard of Geneva finishing. The anglage on this movement is exquisite. It's big, fat, and rounded. You don't need a loop to appreciate it. The Côte de Genève, as you can see, they're thicker on one side and then they thin out and lighten on the other side. That's a hallmark of true Côte de Genève, not the stamped kind. You'll also note that if I can move it with respect to the camera, that the bridge for the balance, the cock for the balance, as well as the screw heads and the brace, the bridge for the winding system, actually turn black as I move them flush to the camera, which is because they are black polished, the highest standard of optical finish. You'll also note inside the balance cock, as well as on the bridge for the barrel, you see 5 interior angles. You can see they're sharp clefts. That's ambitious. I've seen some Geneva seal movements without 1 interior angle. The hardest single act of manually finishing a movement. Now, what you can't quite see, but I'm going to try to describe it, you can just see the edge of the twin escape wheels, which directly impulse the balance. It is a direct impulse natural escapement, meaning it takes the tradition of Breguet into the modern wristwatch era, and it does so with a silicon oscillator. The system operates unlubricated and at high efficiency, such that this watch is able to achieve a French Besançon Observatory chronometer certificate, not as a bare movement as with the COSC, but as a fully cased up caliber inside the watch. 3-day power reserve. It uses a unidirectional winding micro rotor because, first of all, it's a wonderful way to keep the whole movement bare for observation. Also, unidirectional more efficient, but here's the thing. They use a ratchet and pawl system, so there's no bearing rattle in this particular automatic watch. The winding is completely silent. So I guess you could say, it doesn't sound like much, but it looks the business. Also a great company because they're rock solid. And we're actually a dealer, I should mention, here at Govberg. Okay, so this is what we're going to do right now. I'm going to give someone a hat, and I'm going to give someone an Oris hat because we love Oris. Laurent Ferrier represents the haute de gamme par excellence. Oris, sports watches for real people, as they like to say. So I'm going to pick a winner out of our pool, and somebody is about to get an Oris hat. Bum, ba, ba, bum, ba, bum, bum. Okay. And we have, finally, someone gave me all their, okay. Ulrich Modi, congratulations, you have won an Oris hat. It's a beautiful Oris hat. It's the classic sporting tritone of white on black with a few flashes of red. Oris, I love you, especially since you're the horological partner of Audi Sport, and I am a dyed-in-the-wool Audi fan. Congratulations, Ulrich. You have won an Oris hat. Now, moving on to our live chat, you guys have any questions about the watches we've got right here? I've got answers. It's a good match. Let's talk about a watch that people just can't seem to wrap their head around. First, because they don't understand how to set it, and second, because quite frankly, most people are going to go for a better-known Rolex model than the Yachtmaster 2. So what you're looking at here is the Yachtmaster 2. The steel model that came out in 2012, you'll note that it has the square index at 12, no Mercedes hands, so this is the 2012 to 2016 variant. It was lightly redesigned for 2017. Now, of course, it debuted in 2007, but in full yellow gold with red, blue, and white accents. Some people took to calling it the Clown Master. I'm not sure if Rolex took note, but the definitive version, the steel with the blue Serichrome ring command bezel, came out in 2012, and the rest is history. Now, here's how it works. You actually turn the bezel, as you can see, 90 degrees counterclockwise. You push the pusher at 4 o'clock after you turn the bezel, and then you use the crown in its first position, which would ordinarily be winding, but in setting mode allows you to program the watch for any number of minutes between 1 and 10 for a countdown. Now, why would you want that? Well, because it is a regatta timer, and regattas are all about timing the countdown to the beginning of a match, an individual race within a regatta. Now, the nice thing about the watch is that it is programmable with a memory. So if you need to time the same countdown for a series of matches within a regatta, the watch can continuously be reset to the correct countdown time. The other cool thing about it is that when you set it past 10 minutes, it retrogrades, which is always neat. But the watch, prior to the Sky Dweller, the caliber 4161 here was the most complex Rolex movement ever made. Now, I'm actually going to show you what happens when you turn the crown back. You'll see the pusher at 4 o'clock pop back out. And the ring command bezel is actually part of the caliber. The watch is still 100 meters water resistant in spite of the enormous through fitting of the case that the bezel represents. Now, I'm going to start it. Here's the thing that's a little bit unadvertised. You know about the programmable countdown, you know about the memory, but it's also a flyback. And a lot of folks don't realize that the Yachtmaster 2 is a flyback. It's not just a flyback, though. It's also a fly forward. It jumps to the nearest minute. So if the nearest minute is 1 down or 1 up, let's say you're between 4 and 5, but it's 4 minutes and 31 seconds, it will actually jump to the 4. And if it's, for instance, or to the 5, the 4, pardon. So if you're past the halfway point of the minute, it will jump to the smaller minute. If you're not to the halfway point of the minute, it will jump back. So for instance, if you're halfway between 4 and 3, it'll jump to 3. If you're less than halfway between 4 and 3 in the countdown, it'll jump back to 4. So it's a flyback or a fly forward. Got into a little bit of a tongue twister there, describing a complicated watch backwards and upside down. All of that plus a 3-day power reserve, automatic winding, and its chronometer. I love that watch. Okay. Bump, 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 bump. Now, I have another Rolex here that does not represent the haute de gamme in complication, and I have to say, the Yachtmaster 2 is fearsomely complicated, but a true piece of Rolex history. Now, you've heard of the Xerograph, the first Rolex chrono constructed in-house. I want to say it was the 3346 reference, the 1930s. That was the first rotating bezel Rolex, but the Chronograph, the 6202 of late 1952, was the first serially produced rotating bezel Rolex. Of course, the Xerograph, they made fewer than 12 of them. It was basically a prototype. The Chronograph predated the Submariner by about a year to become the first rotating bezel Rolex. Why is that important? Because it has real history. First, it has that flag that flies forever, being the first with a rotating bezel. But second, during the mid-1950s, the U.S. Thunderbirds, the Air Force version of the Navy Blue Angels, adopted the chronograph as standard issue. That is, they actually issued it to pilots because it was handy for aviation to have that bidirectional rotating bezel with which you could line up the index across from the minute hand and time anything from standard rate turns to maneuvers to intervals between waypoints like VORs. The cool thing about this watch is that it gives you that rotating bezel practicality, which I happen to like more than a conventional chronograph. It's cleaner, it's easier to read, and the long-term maintenance costs are lower. You get the history of the chronograph, the heritage of the Datejust, and this represents the last generation of the chronograph. It was discontinued in 2011. So the watch you see here, which is the 116263 in two-tone steel and yellow gold, is a hot commodity, well regarded by collectors because it is so distinctly different. If you want the Datejust that no one else has, you want a chronograph. So great was the legacy of this watch that Vacheron Constantin later released a bidirectional rotating bezel watch that itself acquired the nickname Thunderbird after the Air Force Thunderbirds. So this was not just namesake by the Thunderbirds, but it became the namesake of a Vacheron Constantin. I'll also note that the date wheel is entirely red on white. It's not a roulette. Evens and odds are red. But this is a spectacular watch, a modern, full solid link, solid end link, milled clasp Rolex Datejust from a discontinued line with a grand history. Not many Rolex watches or model lines can be said to have been issued by the U.S. military to servicemen. Okay, I can see right here Watch Lover in Hawaii joining us. I can see Edward Ledden joining us from Sweden, and Jeff saying hello from St. Bart's and love that watch. I can also see Andrew, ST12, saying really cool watch. I agree. We have a couple of chronographs right now. Let me be completely upfront. My personal favorite version of the watch would be white gold. I happen to think that the watch with a blue dial, a white gold fluted bezel, and a steel all white metal look is just killer. For me, with the red accents, the red date disc, the red seconds hand, the chronograph bezel, that's the perfect variant. However, there are some for which two-tone, gold, or nothing is the only way to fly. And in the case of this watch, that's an apropos comparison because, again, it's a flyer's watch, arguably the only Rolex pilot's watch pre-GMT Master of the mid-1950s. So between this and the GMT Master, you got your choice of two Rolex pilot watches. I pick the Datejust chronograph every time. Okay, now, here's a question from B. Nielsen. I'm having difficulty understanding acceptable levels of shock a typical watch can withstand. I understand a JLC Master Compressor Extreme Lab 2 can probably survive mountain biking. Well, there are a couple of different standards for shock resistance. If you go online and you Google ISO watch shock resistance, or if you want the German standard, DIN watch shock resistance, you'll get a very technical description of the definition of a shock-resistant watch. There is such a thing. For instance, the chronometer standard is not a COSC invention, it's the ISO 3159. I want to say it's something like ISO 764 is the anti-magnetic or the magnet-resistant watch standard. It's fairly modest by Milgauss standards, but the bottom line is there are standards for these things that are codified. Now, my personal definition, there are a couple of watches that are more shock-resistant than others. Typically, they're watches that have some sort of internal shock absorber. So most Richard Mille watches will feature a little bit of a rubber donut between the main plate and the exterior of the case. So the point where the watch is actually anchored to the frame of the case, there'll be a small rubber insert. Richard Mille also principally does free-sprung balances, which are very shock resistant, and uses titanium plates and bridges to reduce the amount of sprung mass. Now, JLC, with the Master Compressor Extreme, they typically, with the Extreme Lab 2 and the Compressor Extremes, the Chronograph and the World Alarm that came before, they'll have an inner case and an outer case with shock absorbers between them. And finally, Bremont, probably the most fiscally responsible and accessible highly shock-resistant watch price-wise will use a rubber buffer system between the movement and the case. You'll see the same thing applied, albeit more dramatically, on the old Glashutte Original Sport Impact Evos. But I would say go with a Bremont that has a little like clasp logo on the dial that says shock. That'll be a highly shock-resistant watch that you can take mountain biking, just like any JLC Extreme Lab 2. And in fact, if you do wipe out and wind up with a case refinish or a new sapphire, it's going to be a lot cheaper to clean up after your mistake. So that's what it means. Now I see Jeff saying, for me, I will use a G-Shock for mountain biking just to be safe. You and me both. Honestly, I've taken my Master Compressor Extreme mountain biking to test the theory because they said it could be used that way. That day, it gained 1 second. Again, I proved my point. I also sent it flying a few times on the show onto our carpeted floor. No concerns there. In general, you don't want to test the limits of a shock-resistant watch. Just know that they're there to bail you out. I wouldn't count on them every time. Okay, watches. Let's talk about watches. I'm talking about JLC. Now, David Breton, who's the managing editor of Blog to Watch, once told me that if we ever had the JLC Master Compressor Diving Navy Seals Automatic 42 millimeters on a bracelet, he'd buy it. Well, David, I am throwing down, because not only do I have that watch on a bracelet, I've got it on a strap. Now, here you go. Possibly the most interesting watch from the Navy SEALs collection. When this line came out in 2009, I have to admit I was a little confused. I was in my first year in the Navy, and while I was just beginning to acquire a taste for Jaeger LeCoultre, more academic, admiring from a distance rather than ownership, I never really associated what our special forces were doing with Swiss luxury watches. So this was always a path beyond, a leap too far for me. What JLC did right with these watches is, even if you think it's a little bit absurd that a watch that retailed for close to $10,000 has a U.S. Navy SEALs warfare device on the back, that's the key. This 1 of 1,500 limited edition has all the SEALs themed content on the back. On the front, this is the modern JLC dive watch that we wish they would be making in the year 2018. It's contemporary, it's handsome, it's even compact. The 42 allegedly was the one the SEALs requested themselves. They got a few beater prototypes to break up in their training in Florida and on the West Coast, where the SEALs are based and trained, and they managed to break most of the big watches simply because they came into contact with stuff because they were too thick and they were too large. Thus, the 42 came out in 2010. Now, I'm going to show you what it looks like on the wrist to prove that the watch actually has a wonderfully low profile. It's only 0.4 millimeters thicker than a Rolex Submariner. That's 12.5. This is 12.9. It's easy to wear on a small wrist. And this is the watch on the strap. David, I promised you I'd show you a profile shot, the acrobatic head-on that I just can't do from behind my camera in the light box. And I told you I would show you on the bracelet. So here goes. Again, I'm holding you to this. You said you would buy the one on the bracelet. Okay, now that's on the bracelet. Not only is this the JLC dive watch, the contemporary, full-featured ceramic bezel, high legibility, no vintage Q whatsoever, modern JLC dive watch they should be making today, but this is the Cadillac of JLC bracelets. Vulcanized rubber on steel. This is the watch bracelet that should be on the Polaris. First, note, no spring bars as on the Polaris bracelet. This is all done with screws, and you'll note every link removable for precise sizing. Moreover, this burly and durable setup features a twin deployant clasp, so 4 triggers, absolute security on the wrist, and it has its own micro adjustment system like Rolex EasyLink. Each side has a deployant system that allows you to take out the equivalent of 1/2 of a removable link. So if you were to deploy both sides feature that incremental adjustment. If you were to deploy both, it would be the equivalent of taking out 1 removable link. Collapse them both, and again, it's like shortening by 1 removable link. So this is a bracelet that has stood the test of time. Not only does it look great, but we first saw this bracelet in 2006 on the first Master Compressor Divings. I have yet to see one peeling, cracking, vulcanizing, warping, or degrading at all. Sometimes they get polished a little bit shiny from use, but I've never seen one come apart. And thus, not only does it hold up well, but you save finishing costs on a bracelet that effectively never needs it. Caliber 899 automatic, free-sprung, modern, unidirectional winding, 43-hour power reserve, hacking with a quick set. That is an awesome dive watch for under $8,000. So, now, this is where I have to say that we've got some interesting budget options on the table, and they could not be more different from each other. So, we're going to go with NOMOS Glashutte. You know the Tangomat. Well, have you seen the Tangomat ruthenium date? Now, this is a very dark ruthenium treatment. Now, it's part of the platinum family of metals, but when it's layered on thick and heavy, it has almost a metallic anthracite look to it. The dial is absolutely stunning with a gilt-style print, radially arrayed numerals and indices, and a beautiful 12:6 a central spline that runs from the 12 to the date and contains the corporate marquee, the cannon pinion in the hands, the countersunk sub-seconds, and that date disc. Now, the watch features the NOMOS Zeta caliber. Epsilon would be the same caliber without the date. Now, it's a little bit interesting because it's a deluxe machine for what is essentially an entry-level automatic. Now, 3 ATM water resistance, this is no Ahoy, it's not a dive watch, it's not a sports watch, it's not a water watch, but it is an auto with a very precise regulation system in a Triovis micro adjustment index. And when you hack the movement, it actually features a chronometer grade balance, which is quite impressive because it's an unadvertised feature of the watch. Now, it features the hacking seconds, an interesting semi-quickset date. You actually have to set the hour hand back through 10 p.m. and 12 a.m., reversing back and forth like an old Heuer caliber 11. So it's a semi-quickset date. The watch is only 8.5 millimeters thick, 38 millimeters in diameter, so it wears a treat on any wrist. Here's the difference between the NOMOS in-house calibers that are named after Greek letters like Alpha, Epsilon, Zeta, and the DUWs, like the DUW 3101. It's named after a Greek letter if it's an in-house caliber. If it's an in-house caliber with NOMOS's balance, hairspring, and escapement, the swing system, then it's a DUW for Deutsche Uhrenwerk. So now you know the difference. What's common is this double spiral hand-finished reduction wheel, true heat-blued screws, not kiln-fired, and a unique click that features a long arcing spring and a click tooth that they call a Glashutte ratchet. It's quite handsome, nicely made. This watch for under $3,000 is a screaming deal with oodles of style, and again, somewhere between a sports watch and a dress watch in style. It's iconoclastic in almost every respect. So that's for like $2,900. Very impressive from NOMOS. And of course, shell cordovan, pore-free, hair-free, grain-free, flush and slick Horween leather horse strap. A little bit quirky. Roland Schwertner, the founder of NOMOS, is not a watchmaker, he's a businessman, but the horse shell cordovan strap was the one design feature he demanded from the beginning, his one specific request. Okay, so now let's say you want to go with a chronograph, you want a complication, you want to get a watch that can get wet, so the opposite of the NOMOS functionally, but still something with a timeless style. Well, you can't pick much better than the Omega Seamaster Professional Diver Chronograph. Now, I believe this is the 259980, so the traditional skeleton hand wave dial Bond. This is from the late 1990s, and it was a little bit off the beaten path because this one featured a high-polished bezel with blue lacquer inserts. So absolutely gorgeous, distinctive. The lines of the case haven't changed that much in the 25 years the model's been on the market, and it was just renewed again at Basel World 2018. So Omega remains committed to this design. From 1957 to 1982, the first 25 years of the Seamaster dive watch, the design changed umpteen thousand times. From 93 to the present, it's basically been this profile. So you have a watch that costs less than $3,000, can get wet and wild with a 300-meter water resistance, and has a style that leaves it looking a lot like what's in production today. Now, the watch does feature a wonderfully 90s bracelet. The one major change to the bracelet for 2018 is that the individual links are now more squared off at the side. So rather than the slightly rounded tumble home that you have on this era of bracelet, they're a little bit more square and cobby to look more contemporary. To me, it's the rounded profile of these links side to side that gives them their wonderful period appeal. There's a 90s inflection to the shape of this bracelet. It's Now, make no mistake, the watch is a sports watch, but the bracelet is somewhere between a dress watch and a sports watch, and I happen to love that because it actually chronolocates the watch to a specific period in time and a style that was popular at the time. One thing that has not changed is that you still get the wonderful milled clasp, twin trigger to point. This is the clasp that forced Rolex to rethink its stamped oyster clasps back in the early 2000s. Omega was the dean of clasp manufacturers back at that point, putting to shame what Geneva was producing. And it still has that wonderful fold-out dive extension. I've never used it for swimming. I have used it over a thick winter coat. We're not out of the woods yet, guys. Winter might have one fang left in its mouth for 2018. And should the worst strike, whether you need a coat or a sweater, you can easily deploy up and over to keep your watch visible in the worst of times while you're wearing the best of times. All right, let's give something away. Bump, 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 bump. Okay. Ryan Holt, congratulations. You have just won a Grand Seiko hat. Grand Seiko, really only launched internationally since 2010, big in Japan before that, and beloved of watch guys globally, only launched in the US since 2013. They're making up for lost time as one of the hottest buzz brands on the market. So you can show your true colors, in this case, white on black, typically reserved. Grand Seiko, symbology, nomenclature, and, thanks to the hat, high style. Whether it's on your wrist or on your head, Grand Seiko, the only way to mark time. Congratulations, Ryan Holt. You are our latest winner of the night. Now, I have more on the table. I promised you spectacular things, and this is where we start to take it up a notch. Audemars Piguet in 2010 gave us the Grand Prix. Now, the Grand Prix was a sensational series of carbon fiber case, rose gold and carbon with ceramic, and full platinum. Arguably the most charismatic of the line was the rose gold. You can see it's a combination of a couple of things with forged carbon, some ceramic elements, and the rose gold that gives it its color and its character. One of the nicest features of this trilogy, the Grand Prix series, was that it wasn't explicitly branded. There was nothing about the watch that screamed Mercedes, Ferrari, Lamborghini, Aston Martin, Porsche. Some folks prefer to separate their watches and wheels, and I appreciate that. While there's a common interest between car guys and watch guys, you don't always want to wear your brand on your wrist if it's not the brand of your actual watch. So you have the imagery of automotive sports and machinery without a car brand. So the dial of the watch is very much like a reconfigurable Formula One yoke-style display, or a high-performance dash like you might find on a road-going Ferrari. You can see that the calibration of the dial is highly sporting with a combination of anthracite, red, and white for high contrast. You'll also note that the pushers look like the velocity stacks of a racing car, and they're a combination of ceramic, forged carbon, and gold. You'll note that the crown itself looks like the lug nut of a high-performance automobile for the track, so a center lock wheel nut, as you'd find on a Le Mans car or a Formula One machine. And on the case back, you have lug nut style bolts with spokes, automotive style, fixing the case back with a beautiful blackened and double finished winding mass. You can see it's both media blasted and polished with a golden winding mass at its outer periphery. Audemars Piguet in-house caliber 3126 base with a 50 to 55 hour power reserve and a free sprung balance on a full bridge. High horology finish with a display case back to boot. This is a limited edition watch that represents the best of watches and wheels without stepping over the boundary between the watch brand that you wear and the car brand that you drive. And I have to say, it weighs an absolute ton. To cap all, you can see how the plots themselves feature a double step to look like automotive gas or brake pedals, and then the strap itself features a stitch like automotive upholstery, and on the side, a sort of suede Alcantara-like material like you might find on a high-performance car's steering wheel, seats, or headliner. A beautiful addition in the heritage of the Royal Oak Offshore. This was also one of the last few Shoot the Moon Royal Oak Offshore special editions before the type was dramatically pegged back in 2012. We've seen almost no Royal Oak limited edition since then, just a trickle on a yearly basis. This was the last of the really high times. You'll also note that in profile, and you Lamborghini connoisseurs are going to recognize the inspiration, there's a little bit of a automotive front valance here, like you might see at the front end of a Lamborghini or a Ferrari. Okay, that's a spectacular piece. It's got a rival on the table, and for every Audemars Piguet, there is an Hublot riposte. So I have the Hublot Big Bang Unico Sapphire. Now, I was actually at Basel World when this watch came out in 2016. Full sapphire case, 500 pieces made, full open dial. It's not a skeleton so much as it's simply a completely open dial. Now, we're going to stay focused on this dial for a moment because I want to showcase one of the watch's most interesting facets, and that is the Unico caliber. Now you can see just beneath my finger, you can see the lateral clutch of the chronograph moving in and out. You can see just below the hour hand, which is inconveniently in the way, the column wheel. So the movement was designed inside out so that you could see the operation of the chronograph on the dial side. These features are usually on the case back of a conventional chronograph. Blink and you'll miss it. There is a date window at 3 o'clock. And one of the best features of the caliber 1242 Unico, besides the fact that it has a 3-day automatic winding power reserve, is the fact that it comes with a flyback capability standard. Now, all in sapphire with titanium metal components and a silicone strap, which features a very cool quick release buckle. I always love that. This is a watch that is super expressive. Now, it's clear. Clear in what sense? Well, maybe like the crystal clear waters off the coast of Fort Lauderdale, where Hublot of America is based. Or maybe it's clear like a Scientologist in the absolutely crazy out-of-your-mind sense of the word clear. The bottom line is, whichever way you figure this watch lines up, clear as day is the fact that this is a celebration of the machine, brought from the inside out, visible from every aspect, feather light and comfortable on the wrist. This was the watch that brought sapphire, full sapphire cases into the realm of the merely wealthy. Prior to this, we had the likes of Greubel Forsey, Zenith, and Richard Mille selling their full sapphire cases for a cool $800,000 to $1.2 million. Again, not for every taste, but I do appreciate the aesthetic. I do appreciate the visibility and the movement, and guess what? It's loomed, so it might be easier to read it at night than during the day. We can agree to disagree on that one, but I happen to like it, and I like it even better in its Furious Fuchsia red sapphire variant. Okay, so now I can see that this will be controversial. We have some very pointed comments rolling out in the comment box, and I'm not afraid to read them. Okay, I can see right here we've got BS saying, if you had to pick between that AP and this Hublot, this or that, laugh out loud. To be honest, if I had to pick, that AP is too much colored gold for me. I couldn't wear that thing with a straight face. It's not my style. The Sapphire Hublot is not my style, but it's closer to my personal tastes than the AP. The AP to me is something that a Russian oligarch with a Gazprom concession wears on the deck of his yacht while watching the Monaco Grand Prix. That's the Grand Prix that this Grand Prix brings to mind. Whereas the Hublot, I can actually say that from across the room, you can't tell what it is. It disappears on your wrist. When I tried to film that watch in my Lightbox, I had to actually close down the aperture setting on my camera to make everything darker because the watch disappeared in front of the lens at 12 inches range. So in that sense, it might be the rare Hublot that flies under the radar. Okay, also I can see Boet is saying that I didn't notice the date until you told me. I can see Lux Watches for Newbies saying, Tim, put it on, please. Okay, I can do that. Remember, I took it apart, I can put it back together. That's the cool thing about Hublot's quick release strap system. Okay, now it's back together. I'm going to put it on. On my wrist, this is a big watch, but wearable. 57.5 millimeters across the wrist, but the case itself has curvature. The lugs turn down, so it wraps around your wrist. Is it big? Hell yeah. But you know what? It weighs a hell of a lot less than a full gold Datejust in 36 millimeters. It's an easy watch to wear. It's very comfortable, and part of the reason for that is that Hublot, making rare use of a silicone as opposed to rubber strap. To get this translucent look, they had to go with soft, gummy silicone. So this is a very comfortable watch to wear. I also see right here, we have Chamois saying, I mean hate Hublot. I was looking at them yesterday. They look cheap. The movements look very one-dimensional. It is not my kind of decoration. The design won't last 10 years. To test the theory, the first Big Bang came out in 2005. Still growing at double-digit percentages per year. Hublot, along with the likes of Moser and Richard Mille, growing at double digits in volume per year. So will it last 10 years? From this date, I have no idea. Has it lasted 10 years and then some? Oh yeah. Bump. Now, Ryan H. saying, this is a divisive night. That's a fact. But can I show you something that we can all agree is freaking amazing? Okay, first let me show you my first lieutenant, and then I'm going to show you my commander-in-chief. This is the Sinn Anniversary 910. This is a watch that came out to mark 55 years of Sinn in 2016. It's a watch that's powered by a Valjoux 7750 that you'll note has been converted to work with a column wheel. So modified for a column wheel architecture, it is a split-seconds chronograph in a style that you might not associate. I shouldn't call it Sinn, it is Sinn, properly speaking, using the German accent. This is not a style with syringe hands, a cream lacquered dial, and a double tachometer scale for slow things and for fast things. That's what it is. With a twin register dial, the split seconds chronograph, display caseback, and I would almost call it a halfway between a dress watch and a vintage sports watch. Beautifully different, a special way to celebrate a special occasion, and again, a highly customized 7750. 100 meters water resistant on a full bracelet. You can wear this to the opera, you can wear this to the pool, you can wear this in the boardroom or on the boardwalk. 41.5 millimeters. This anniversary watch is even smaller than you'd associate with a Sinn watch. Let me show you what it looks like on my 16 centimeter wrist. They only made 300 of these. Beautifully different. This shows the full range of Helmut Sinn's manufacture. The late master, aviator, watchmaker, and entrepreneur was still alive for the 55th anniversary of the company he founded in 1961, back when this watch was made, and I'm absolutely certain that his input was pivotal to the design. It's a gorgeous dial with that cream color, the tritone with the red and the black, as well as the depth of the countersunk sub-registers with polished chapter rings and the applied indices. I love this watch. And again, value for under $7,000, that's a hell of a lot of watch, and history for the money. Okay, cost no object. You sell the house, the other house, a couple of organs, and your kids are going to, let's just say they're going to be Army airborne through college. All of which puts you in a position to maybe possibly buy the Jaeger LeCoultre Gyro Tourbillon 3 Jubilee. What is it? Well, okay guys, you're going to want to get a close look at this. It is a digital jumping chronograph, which you're about to see, with a gyro tourbillon that moves on 2 axes. You've got a 24-second circuit, so it spins on one axis in 24 seconds. Let's get closer still. I'm going to lean out over my desk here because this is one you don't want to miss. So it has a 1-minute tourbillon axis and a 24-second tourbillon axis. Take that, Grubel Forsey. Not only do you have that column wheel vertical clutch digital jumping chronograph, not only do you have the gyro tourbillon cage beating away at 21,600 vibrations per hour, but if you look carefully, you can see it has not an overcoil hairspring, not a chronometer-style cylinder hairspring. It has a heat-blued spherical hairspring, and you can see it there. A spherical hairspring. It looks exactly like an AT&T logo. Now the watch with that biaxial tourbillon and spherical hairspring is a fearsome timekeeper. If anyone ever told you that tourbillon was not a complication for wristwatches, I beg to differ. When you have a multi-axial tourbillon and either an overcoil, a cylinder hairspring, or a spherical hairspring, you have a tourbillon that can keep exquisite time. You can even see the blued gold balance beating away inside that spherical tourbillon cage. The watch also has a beautifully enameled and hammered day-night indicator for the time at center, so you can look at the index and tell whether it's day-night. Here you can see it's actually early in the morning as the night portion is moving past the index and giving way to day. You'll also note that the German silver bridges and plates are hammered by hand to create this gorgeous granet texture. Turn it over, guess what? There's more. That's right. You're looking at the Jubilee caliber, handmade, hand-executed, hand-regulated, so beautiful that, quite frankly, you have to go on our website and look at the studio photos, because even with all the money we've spent on these cameras, the Jubilee caliber 176 is not done justice. Note the double spiral of the barrel. Look at that, hand-finished. Note the channeling. There's actually a polished lip at the edge of every frosted, hammered bridge. All of the screws are immaculately kiln-fired, heat-blued, and then hand-matched to make sure they all have the same tone. This is a watch to end all watches. One of 75 made in platinum. It's also an everyday watch. This is a watch you could wear every day. It's not a prototype. It's not a science experiment. JLC made it to be worn. But look at the detailing, guys. Look at the clasp on this watch. White gold and double deployant. It's over-engineered to a fault. You've seen the Extreme Lab 2, and it's double Ardeon with quick release and micro adjustment. Check this out. Okay, it has an index that moves back and forth using a double rack and pinion system, so you can micro adjust and then freeze in place your micro sizing. That is the limit. How much does it cost? Honestly, I don't know. This is price on request, and I wash my hands of sales. I want nothing to do with it. I've heard €500,000 new. So what can I say other than call for pricing and be prepared to make an offer? I'm going to be jealous. So, if you are the next home for this watch, give it a good one. Until then, I've got one more thing to give away, and I'm going to pick my last winner of the night. Bum, 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 bum. Okay, Kiki Fry is asking, put the Gyro 3 on the wrist. Okay. By the way, guys, I do have a video of this watch online. I actually have 2 videos of this watch online now. Easy to wear. Boom. Just like that. Nothing weird. It's a big watch, very wearable, 16 centimeter circumference wrist. I digress. Picking a winner. Bum, 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 bum. Lux for Watch is asking, is 5 ATM water resistance good for a tourbillon? Yeah. Our last winner of the night is Barry Thornton. You're going to be my homeboy. I'm giving you a Watchbox hat. Show your true colors. Watch you want is now Watchbox. Thanks for joining our team. All right, guys, thanks for joining me tonight. This is Watchbox, watch reviews. Subscribe for more like this, as well as daily updates. I have 4 new watches going live at 7 a.m. tomorrow. Be the first to see those videos delivered to your door, to your inbox. I'm Tim. This is the Watchbox. These are my friends. You are my friends, and thanks for logging on.